How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck. I tried to film in the backyard, but there's a guy running a tile saw, so I didn't think that would sound good coming through the mic. So we're in my living room. It's where I've got all my pictures and stuff, so I hope you enjoy this backdrop a little bit more than the basement. I'm mixing it up. In today's video, I've got 3 topics to cover, starting out with a brand new Steam Deck beta that's all about controller support, so this one should be exciting, and there might be a little bit of a hint about the Steam frame that is allegedly coming soon. I mean, who knows? And then the second story I want to cover is going to be a big one about why game performance matters. We've got even more proof that that's exactly what developers should be focusing on, whether they want to admit it or not. And lately, it seems like they do not want to admit it, which sucks. Thank you so much for getting me to 80,000 subscribers. I really appreciate it. I remember when I started this channel, I thought it was just going to be a fun little side project that I get to work on, you know, when I'm done with all my PS Ready and horror channel videos. And now this is the channel that I enjoy focusing on the most. So I appreciate you the most. But let's get into the first news story here and talk about this latest Steam Deck beta. Valve has been on a tear lately, just releasing update after update after update, and they've moved the focus away from these external handhelds like the Legion Go, the ROG Ally, the Ally X, and all the other ones they've been releasing Steam Deck updates for, or SteamOS updates for, I'd rather say. And they put the focus back on the Steam Deck, and thankfully the features they're bringing along are pretty cool. So the first thing they've done is improve DualSense gyro support. So if you didn't know, the DualSense brought forward a lot of the features from the PS3 era controller, mainly gyro. So it was called like the 6-axis because somehow Sony lost the rights to the DualShock name after the DualShock 2. They went through this like whole lengthy legal battle and then were able to get the DualShock name back. So then they brought vibration back to that controller with the DualShock 3, and then the DualShock 4 also had gyro support, and I think it's the best it's ever been on the DualSense. So it's good to see Valve kind of going in, tinkering around, and getting gyro support all set up. I like gyro on the actual Steam Deck itself. If I'm being real, I don't use a controller all that much on the Steam Deck, but on my Bazzite PC, which is technically SteamOS, I like having that compatibility where it's one-to-one between the Steam Deck and the PC that's playing on my TV. So having gyro support on the main controller I use, which is a DualSense Edge, is great. I'm glad Valve is going in and fixing this. And then the second thing they did is improve gyro support for the Nintendo Switch 1 controllers. If you didn't hear about this, they basically updated the firmware, or like the drivers, I guess. I don't really know how it works on Linux, but they updated the way the Steam Deck can interact with Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons, not the Switch 2 ones. Those still don't work because Nintendo locked it down, which sucks, but it lets them work simultaneously as one controller. So you pair them with the Steam Deck individually, but once you do that, it'll be able to read them as one controller. And they added in gyro support for the individual controllers so they can work independently of each other. I don't know how it worked before because I don't use the Joy-Cons with the Steam Deck, but if it worked where, you know, if you moved one controller, it would override the other's gyro support, that obviously wouldn't be very good. You'd basically have to use it with the Joy-Con grip, but now you can make them work independently of each other. And I guess use one for like crouching or something, and then the other for camera control or fine-tuning aiming. I'm sure there's developers out there who already are hard at work figuring out how to implement this into their games, but it's good to see more support for these third-party external controllers coming to the Steam Deck and SteamOS itself. They also fixed some issues with the guide button where when you disable it on a third-party controller, it would still open up the overlay. I don't know why you would want to disable it, but if it is disabled, it should be fixed now so that when you hit that button, it'll just power on and off the controller. Maybe that is for the ROG Ally or one of these other devices that has a dedicated button for pulling up a menu like a performance overlay or something that's also tied to being the Xbox button, and they were like conflicting with each other. I don't know, but I guess this was something people were doing because they went through the effort to make it so when you disable it, it stays disabled. So good job there. And then the last thing they did was update game input support. So like the latest drivers, I would assume this is probably for the Legion Go 2 and the Xbox ROG Ally. The Ally is weird because they're all pretty much the exact same, even internally. If you take the back off, they all basically look identical to each other with some very minor changes. But every time they release a new version of the ROG Ally, for some reason, it has a completely different controller profile. So like when the beta of SteamOS came out and you were able to install it on any handheld you already had, the regular white edition of the ROG Ally was already supported right out of the gate, but you had to wait a little over a month to get the controller features supported on the ROG Ally X. So that wasn't ideal. I'm glad that they're consistently updating that on the back end 2 for any controller you want to use under the sun, whether it's from Lenovo, Asus, Nintendo, or anyone else, unless it's the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller, because again, Nintendo locked that down, which is a massive, massive bummer. They also updated Remote Play to give you a connect button when you're connecting to the remote desktop. I know a lot of people have been using Remote Play lately for like Unreal Engine 5 games, but more specifically Battlefield 6. On the other Windows handhelds like the ROG Ally, it's pretty much impossible to get a locked 60 FPS out of the game. So no matter what handheld you're on, actually, your best option is going to be streaming it from your main PC. I actually saw a post on X from one of my favorite gaming YouTubers, Operator Drewski. He was playing Battlefield 6 on his Steam Deck, streaming it from his main PC to his porch, drinking a beer. Looked like a really good time. I've been messing around with it a little bit, and the latency is there for sure, but it's not one of those games where you need to have the absolute quickest reaction time. It's more about setting up your shots than something like Call of Duty, so I feel like it honestly is viable to play over Remote Play on your Steam Deck and get a handheld experience in Battlefield 6 that's pretty good. I can't play this on my Bazite PC, obviously because of the Javelin anti-cheat, but it's running pretty well on my Windows PC, and I don't know what happened, but I was playing like absolute garbage for the first entire weekend. I was just using the M433, the starting gun for the assault class. Then magically last night I was playing and I went from getting like 5 or 6 kills a match all the way up to like 20, 25 kills. So either they changed something on the back end or some setting wasn't working that got updated. Regardless, I'm having way more fun with Battlefield 6 now that I'm actually competitive. It was so deflating after hundreds of hours of Hunt Showdown, which is one of the most hardcore shooters I think you can play on the entire market, and I played a ton of Escape from Tarkov, to jump into a more casual shooter than those like Battlefield 6 and be getting stomped repeatedly over and over again. It was so depressing and so deflating. So I don't know what happened, but I got my shit figured out in this game and I'm actually competitive now, so I'm having a lot more fun. And then finally they hid the mouse cursor when you're streaming VR to a SteamOS equipped device. That seems like a little bit of a hint for the Steam frame that they've been working on, that they trademarked. They also added in the Mango HUD with the latest backend update to whatever the operating system or flavor of SteamOS that thing's going to use recently. So I don't know what they're dragging their feet on not announcing this thing, but I'd really like to see it. I just want the Band-Aid ripped off on the price. I really enjoy VR. I like my Oculus Quest 3 or Meta Quest 3, whatever it's called. I got it last year and I played the Batman Arkham game. I thought it was really good. I played Metro Exodus. That was a really scary game. I didn't play Aliens Rogue Incursion, but if there's a game that I'm interested in playing in VR, I'd love to have the capability of doing it. And I'd also be more than happy to abandon the Meta platform for the Valve platform with Steam. We just need them to announce the Steam frame already, but it's very clear that they are nipping and tucking things behind the scenes. And honestly, I feel like whereas the Steam Deck was a new platform, so you could get a little bit of grace if you're Valve from people who just love the idea of having a Steam-based platform, you could get some bugs through and be fine as long as you fix them quick. When it comes to VR, you got to impress people right out of the gate. It's got to be basically perfect. So I kind of understand why they're taking so long to get this thing out there. Regardless, I really want to see what they've been working on, because I feel like Valve's really the only company who can make VR a thing, if not Sony and Meta. Like if they can't figure it out, Valve is kind of like the last chance to really figure out VR and make it a viable platform. So I'm glad they're taking the time to get it right. I've also seen so many of you playing Dying Light 2, and Dying Light the Beast that it just makes me happy, because I don't see a lot of people on my X page talking about it or on Reddit or anything. But then when you check the actual player numbers, it seems like people really genuinely love Dying Light as much as I do, and that makes me happy. But that brings us to the second news story here, which is more ironclad proof that developers really need to start focusing on performance in their games, especially if they're using Unreal Engine 5. So as far as the launch for Borderlands, it reviewed pretty decent. And as far as the gameplay changes they made from 3 to 4 go, I mean, it's a night and day difference just in the playability of the first person shooting aspect and even the looting aspect of Borderlands 4, and the fact that they made it a full big open world game. I think in that respect, it was pretty successful, but the biggest drawback, of course, was performance. I ended up having to upgrade the CPU from a 7600X in my Bazite PC to a 9800X 3D because I couldn't get over 55 FPS in Borderlands 4 to save my life, and I realized it was because the 9070 was being bottlenecked by my CPU. And even with that huge CPU upgrade, with that great GPU, I mean, the frame time graph is at 60 a lot of the time, but it's still so uneven that it makes me not want to play the game. And that's with a pretty beefy PC. Like, it's an AMD graphics card that's on par with like a 5070 or 5080, so it's not like 4090 or 5090 level, but it is a very good graphics card. And even I have to use FSR4, run the settings between medium and high. I'm playing at 1440p, so by no means pushing the game to its absolute limit. It's easy to see why 85% of the players who played this game day one have dropped off. Now, I'll throw them a little bit of a bone. Battlefield 6 is obviously a massive game. I feel like no matter what type of gamer you are, you probably had a passing interest in the return of Battlefield, especially after seeing how great the reviews are. But even with that, it is a very dramatic drop off from, you know, the 300 and however many thousand people were playing it over a launch weekend to what it's at now. And I honestly think the performance issues are a huge reason for that, because we just saw this play out with Monster Hunter Wilds. It was basically the exact same situation. They made big upgrades to the map. It's an open world map for the first time. They made big upgrades to the combat. People really enjoyed the amount of content in the game. The end game was decent, but people just kind of threw their hands up and said, I can't do this anymore based on the performance. And that's the one thing Capcom, it seems, really refuses to put in the effort to fix, and they are paying the price for it. They've like hovered from mixed to very negative on Steam back and forth ever since this game came out, and they're more focused on releasing new content and DLC for the game, and they're paying the price for it. So like, if you have a game that's multiplayer based like Monster Hunter, like Borderlands 4, I don't understand why developers refuse to acknowledge how big of an issue the performance has been with a lot of these games. It's with Unreal Engine 5 and it's with the RE engine in the case of Monster Hunter, and then developers will do these conferences and be like, oh, we've identified all these niche small issues that no one was bringing up as the reason why our game stopped selling well after launch and lost a lot of its players. And I just don't understand why they refuse to acknowledge the one that everyone is talking about, which is performance. Like, I understand that the vast majority of gamers out there buy 2 games a year. It's probably Battlefield and NCAA football this year, but there is a big group of people who are your hardcore base who are going to stick around and keep coming back for the end game and play DLC. And the biggest thing you can do to support that group of people, because that's me, I'm talking about myself, is just make sure your game performs decently. I don't feel like 60 FPS is the biggest deal when consoles like the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro and Xbox Series X made a huge advertising point out of playing at 4K 120. And now we're lucky if we get 4K and a consistent 30. Like, it's a 4K with an upscaler, upscaling from 720p, and it can barely hold a decent frame time at 30 FPS. And I understand that the console hardware is older, right, by the time it even comes out, and it's not as powerful as a desktop PC, but I'm having the exact same issues on my desktop PC. So, like, as I always say, something needs to change. And I think it's worth talking about on this channel because, as we've seen over and over again, if developers put in the time and energy to support the performance of their games, they generally scale pretty well all the way down to the Steam Deck. And even an Unreal Engine 5 game that came out recently with Tokyo Extreme Racer, it had the time and effort put into actually making it run well, and it works incredibly well on the Steam Deck. It's one of the best games I've played this year. And even Silent Hill F, that had more effort put into it than Metal Gear Solid Delta and Silent Hill 2 Remake last year. And shocker, it's mostly playable on the Steam Deck. You can get a decent enough performance where if it is your only device that you have, excluding like a bigger gaming PC or a PS5, it is totally viable to play Silent Hill F on your Steam Deck. So I don't know what the issue is, whether it's meeting quarterly goals, whether it's what Tim Sweeney said, where developers are saving optimization for the end of the development pipeline. But I mean, look at Battlefield. It doesn't run well on handhelds or well enough for an online shooter, but it runs decent between 40 and 50 FPS, and they're supporting very low end GPUs. And I think that game is going to stick around. Like, Call of Duty got rid of skill-based matchmaking because they're legitimately afraid of Battlefield 6 for the first time in a long time. And I almost said Borderlands 6 so many times in this video, guys. Like, I'm sorry, there's a lot to keep track of here. But anyway, guys, I'm currently working on a Next Fest demo roundup, and I wanted to try out a video that's basically what's on my Steam Deck. Let me know if you're interested in that down in the comments below. As always, let me know what you're playing as well. I get recommendations from you guys, and you have great taste in games, so I really appreciate appreciate it when you let me know what you're playing. Subscribe to the channel. Have a great week. Have a great day. I genuinely hope everything is going well for you guys right now. It's my favorite time of year, so I've been in a good mood lately. Anyway, guys, as always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.